this is probably the biggest story in Mariners world right now, aside from the fact that they have had a pretty tough road trip, which is, what in the hell is going on with these home road splits, especially on the pitching side?
Well, I'm coming to the conclusion that this might not be a good road pitching staff.
Mm-hmm.
Not good. Period. Like, this is a staff that we've tabbed at times as the best staff in baseball, but I'm not even sure they're good away from T-Mobile Park. Legitimately. I'm not. There are some very concerning things when we're talking about the splits between how the Mariners pitch in their home park at T-Mobile Park and how they pitch away from it. And given they still pitch in good pitchers' parks on the road and yet are not successful. Why is that? So let's paint the background picture for those of you not aware of the home road differences. They pitched about the same amount of innings at home and on the road. At home, they have a 2.54 ERA. They've given up 33 homers, and they've given up a 5.56 OPS against. On the road, the ERA is at 4.49. They've given up 19 more home runs, and this was, by the way, before today, and a 7.18 OPS against. The whip is a third of a number higher. Whip, walks and hits per inning pitch. The strikeouts are way up at home, and the walks are way up on the road. Simply put, they are the best pitching staff in baseball at home, and they are a mediocre pitching staff on the road. That's what that is, Lyle. That's what the first half of this 2024 season has told us. But why? It's the same pitchers, it's the same stuff, and yet away from home, it is not good.
So I'm going to be totally honest, and we get into this with Gary Hill a little bit too in our conversation with him. I don't know if there is a quantifiable reason you can put your finger on. If you just want to look at what the Mariners have done home versus road the last 2 years, a season ago, they had a team ERA pitching-wise of 3.42 at home, and it was 4.07 on the road. So yes, they were better in T-Mobile Park. It was certainly not as drastic as it is right now. 2022, 3.26 team ERA at home. So not quite the performance they're putting up in 2024 where it's been magnificent. But it was also a 3.94 team ERA on the road. So this is not a regular annual occurrence where the Mariners just happen to be all worldly inside of T-Mobile Park and a below average staff when they go on the road. No, this is significant to this season. And it has never been this drastic before. And what is the reason behind it? Look, we can try and pinpoint a couple things here, but I'm not sure if it goes anything beyond you're going to be left guessing. Is it because the crowd pumps them up so much at home? Is it because obviously the conditions are a little bit more suitable for pitchers at home? A little bit. Again, it is the friendliest pitcher park in baseball, T-Mobile Park. But is it a comfortability thing where they just have their routine of being in Seattle? Like, I don't know, because the split should not be this drastic. But like the one that stands out the most here, before I let you try to pinpoint some reasons why it might be happening, because I know you have a theory or two. But like I just keep looking at Bryce Miller, and he's not the only one with some drastic splits home and road this year. Like George Kirby has some decently drastic splits. Luis Castillo's splits are now pretty drastic, especially after the start here on Tuesday. But Bryce Miller, man, I mean, you're talking about a 1.82 ERA at home this year and a 6.28 ERA on the road. I don't know. Like, is that just going to level itself out? I have no idea, because that is drastic.
How is it possible for a pitching staff to have a whiff rate at home that is first in baseball? First. Do you want to guess where they are on the road?
22nd.
Fourth. 24th.
Oh, 24th. I thought you were about to tell me they were fourth.
No. So how is it the pitchers that throw the same pitches at home and on the road have a drop-off of 24 spots?
So there is an article out there on Pitcher List, which we would encourage anybody to read if you haven't, and they detail a lot of what the numbers look like in 2023 in terms of pitching in T-Mobile versus pitching outside of T-Mobile. And along with T-Mobile Park being a very friendly pitcher's park and a pitcher's environment, it's also a strikeout environment, because you look at the whiff numbers, home versus road, especially last year, and they are a little bit more favorable in Seattle. A little bit. But it's not first to 24th, I can tell you that.
What's interesting about that article, I'm going to get into that here in a second, and paint a little bit of background on why this article is so important. So T-Mobile Park, for example, if you weren't aware, StatCast has a way they measure ballpark run environments called Park Factor. And Park Factor it's like a 3-year rolling average of offensive production in a ballpark. 100 is average, higher is better, lower is worse. The Mariners are at 92. That is far and away the worst hitter's environment. The next closest is Citi Field, that's at 95. 3 percentage points in something like this is pretty drastic, especially below 100 if you take a look at those teams that are below the 100 level. It is the worst ballpark for quality for WOBA on contact, which is called WOBAcon. It looks like bacon, but it's actually how much damage are the balls you're putting in play doing. And that's what that represents, and T-Mobile Park is the worst in baseball at that. It is at or near the bottom in all of singles, doubles, and triples individually on offensive production. Shockingly, though, the thing that comes up the most, Lyle, about T-Mobile Park is that the ball doesn't carry. T-Mobile Park over the last 3 seasons is 11th in baseball in home runs. Or, sorry, not 11th, middle of the pack in home runs. Mariners are 11th in homers this season. But T-Mobile Park, a park that does not, allegedly, does not let fly balls fly out of the ballpark, is middle of the pack in baseball in home runs. So that doesn't make much sense. So you're telling me they say the balls get knocked down in the thick air, but the balls that you hit more in a line drive actually don't do anything. Well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But also, here's the most important one. It's the strikeouts. T-Mobile Park, over the last 3 seasons, has been the best park in baseball for pitcher strikeouts on both sides. Yes, you can make a joke that the Mariners, no shit, TJ, the Mariners strike out a lot. Of course, the Park Factor is going to say T-Mobile Park has the best strikeout factor. And, that could be an okay point. But it's not everything, because the Mariners don't take every at-bat at T-Mobile Park. So here's what I think this pitcher list article tries to highlight. It highlights that the impact that T-Mobile Park has specifically is fastballs. That's what it has the most effect on. Saying that the difference of home versus road, like whiff rates, contact rates on fastballs, is drastic. And it's enough to say that could be a reason, right? It's more than breaking balls. It's more than off-speed pitches. It is fastballs at T-Mobile Park that do the most damage. I have one more thing to add, but I'll let you respond to that first. What you think?
Well, even if fastballs play up that much more in Seattle than anywhere else, I still don't think that answers the question of why it is so drastic in terms of the differences between home and road. That should factor into it a little bit. But to be as drastic of a pitching staff this year at home versus on the road, again, I'll go back to this. I don't think there is a quantifiable answer here. I really don't. If you want to look at the strikeouts, we're going to use 2023 data here because this is what the article used. And last year, looking at the rotation, Brian Wu had almost a 10% difference between strikeout rate at home and on the road. Luis Castillo and George Kirby were a little over 7% in terms of difference. So there were some differences there in terms of home versus road strikeout rate. And those guys, I would say Castillo and Wu especially, sure, rely on strikeouts. But to the point where Luis Castillo, entering his start today, had a 4.34 road ERA compared to a 2.9 at home, and now after another tough outing here in Tampa, it's probably going to get closer to 5. The fact that fastballs are more effective at T-Mobile Park doesn't answer enough of the question of how it's this drastic.
But the Mariners are a primary fastball team. That's why they're so good. They attack the strike zone with velocity. That's what they've tried to preach.
But this is the same rotation that they had a year ago. And the splits weren't this drastic last year. Wasn't this drastic 2 years ago?
It is a different offensive environment this year. We've articulated that, how offense is down, and perhaps it plays up a little bit. So I have some numbers this year. I went and I did a little bit of digging myself. And it backs up what Adam, who wrote this pitcher list article, found when he was looking at 2023, and I think he looked at 22 and 21 as well when he's trying to find some of those whiff rates. But I found as well, Lyle, like looking at the Mariners pitching staff as a whole, you would assume, based on the reputation of Mariners pitching, that their off-speed and breaking balls would be held in pretty high regard no matter where they play, right?
Sure, yeah.
When you go onto Baseball Savant, you try and find some results-based numbers on how the Mariners' off-speed pitches have performed this year. I looked at two numbers. I looked at expected xWOBA, which is quality of contact. What's the quality of contact against that pitch? Higher is lower, lower is better. Or higher is worse, lower is better. The average is, I think, about 310. And then I looked at whiff rate as well. Do you realize those pitches, their off-speed pitches and breaking balls, were middle of the pack at home, and then on the road they got a lot worse. So into like the bottom 30% of baseball in terms of effectiveness on those two stats. So that's that. But when you look at fastballs, wow, the Mariners this year have the best fastball whiff rate by far, and the best quality of contact against their fastballs at home. Then when they go on the road, it turns into a middle-of-the-road pitch. So let me summarize this. So when the Mariners are at home this year, they pair middle-of-the-pack breaking stuff over as an entire staff. You could probably nitpick with more specific guys, but overall, you take the best fastballs based on quality of contact and strikeout rate in baseball, and you pair it with good breaking stuff. But then when you go on the road, you have a middle-of-the-road fastball effectiveness, and you pair it with bottom 30% off-speed and breaking pitches. And that right there, that doesn't signal best staff in baseball. And then we stop. You almost get to the point where you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. So maybe there aren't actually that good on the road. Like the results say they're not that good on the road, but the numbers also represent, yeah, they might just not be good pitchers on the road, period, when we're sitting here expecting them to be good.
It's still just fascinating. It's fascinating that changing states and hopping on a plane to go anywhere else is tanking their ERAs on the road. Because it's not going to Cincinnati and that's tanking their ERAs, or going to the old Texas ballpark, which was a hitter's park, or going to Colorado constantly. They play in pitchers' parks. That's why this is so puzzling to me. Because, look, Seattle is the friendliest pitcher's park, but it's not like they play in no other pitcher's parks. Yet, it doesn't seem to matter where they go this year, and it's killing them. And if you want to go back to the strikeout rate thing, if you want to make the argument of, okay, Castillo and Wu are two pitchers that rely a lot on strikeout rate, and the fact that their strikeout rate, at least last year, took a decent jump down when they go on the road, maybe it affected them a little bit. Okay, but I'll say it again. Last year, their road ERA wasn't like that. Look at George Kirby. Kirby doesn't rely on strikeouts. This is another guy that's got drastic home road splits despite not relying on the strikeout. And it doesn't seem to matter what park they go to. It's affecting him everywhere. I don't know.
And there's stuff mentioned in this article about the batter's eye, and the batter's eye could absolutely be contributing. We've talked more about the T-Mobile Park batter's eye in the last 2 weeks than I ever imagined when we started this podcast we'd be talking about. But yeah, we've been talking about this article brings up, the slanted nature of the batter's eye. And one of the many reasons could be that fastballs on that batter's eye just look different than they do anywhere else. It is possible that specific pitch could look different than it does anywhere else. Yeah. A right-handed, because the Mariners will use the majority of their innings in the rotation as the sample there, mostly all right-handed pitchers, that a right-handed throwing fastball is the worst combination to have when looking at that batter's eye and what it does to pitches.
Yeah, it could be. Well, I hadn't even given it that much thought until we hopped on Trevor May's podcast, Mayday, with him a couple weeks ago, and he started to bring it up and say, I think this is a real thing. He said he's talked about it with a few different people, and they think it's affected guys. And again, I hadn't given it too much thought, and then we started to give it more thought, and the fact that, yeah, it is a unique batter's eye. It is unique in the way that it's pushed decently far back. It's not right up against the wall. It's slanted. it's, it's different than a lot of ballparks, and maybe it really does affect hitters. Maybe it affected Teoscar Hernandez last year when he was in Seattle. And to that point, maybe it makes it that much harder for road hitters to pick up Seattle pitchers at home. Maybe that's a real thing. We don't know that, but it could be.
Here's what my conclusion will be from this, is that I have a hard time seeing the Mariners winning the division if these road struggles keep up. If the drop-off continues to be this drastic, they're not winning the division. You only get half your games at home. You got to go at least compete on the road. And some of these recent results on the road have just not been good enough.
Right. And you look at your rotation, I'll say it again. Bryce Miller's ERA on the road is over 6. Luis Castillo's ERA on the road is probably going to be close to 5 when it all updates on Wednesday morning. George Kirby's going to enter his start on Wednesday with a 4.41 road ERA. Those are 3 guys in the rotation that have very, very unfavoring road numbers this year. And you cannot roll into road series with your starters just being non-competitive on the road. It's just not going to work, because like there's series where all 3 of those guys may need to pitch all at once, and all 3 of them can't just blow up and the Mariners have success. It's just not going to work. It's going to have to turn around.
And based on how this is going, we've talked, can the Mariners just get into the playoffs with this rotation? Just get into the playoffs with this rotation? Like, no, they need to go get into the playoffs and play at home with this rotation. That's where the difference is right now. Things could change in the second half, but as of right now, the only way this rotation does what we thought it would at the beginning of the season in a playoff series is if they're playing those games at home. And if you don't win the division, it is really hard to get a home series.
Yeah, it is. And it affected the Mariners in 2022 when they made the playoffs. They didn't have a home series. They might have won in Toronto, but that Houston series could have looked a lot different if they had more games in Seattle. I'll tell you that, especially if the first 2 were in Seattle.